public analysts have recommended a drastic cut in cost of governance as the only and safest way to cushion the economic weight on Nigeria. They said the statistics of the effects of the current cost of governance on the national economy and the Human Development Index are humongous and unsustainable. As at April 2013, it was revealed that Nigeria reportedly spent 96.3% of its revenue on debt servicing. That is up from 83.2% in 2021. And the World Bank has raised a timely warning on how the fiscal deficit has worsened the nation's public debt stock. We're now being joined by a political economist and development expert, Ayobami Oyalowo, to provide perspective on this situation, which stakeholders say have become a clog in the wheel of progress of Nigeria. Good to have you on Newsday. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, as Nigerians grapple with the removal of oil subsidy, in a bid to conserve funds for other developmental projects, a number of Nigerians also believe we should be discussing and actually implementing cutting the cost of governance. I'd like to know what your thoughts on this are, and what does the government, and do you think the government of the day, do you think they have the political will, to actually cut the cost of governance?
Oh, which one do I handle first? The first one or the second one? Well, I agree with you that we have to cut the cost of governance. We have to cut the cost for governance. It's although we also have to have context to this. You see, I remember when this government was going to come on board, some of the issues that we have been grappling with include, but not limited to, even education as part of it, especially the tertiary institutions. We have too many of them, and government has been subsidizing that part. I think the president talked about giving what he called student loan so that we can have an international best practice. We also have to look at some duplicity in agencies and departments. I know the past government that just left a week ago was talking about doing something about implementing the oral science report, but I don't think that saw the light of day. But I can tell you clearly that whatever me and you say here, the biggest cost of governance will be corruption. It does not matter how many agencies you cancel or you merge. If you have corruption, you always have challenges. And I'll give you one good example. We had one government agency that was created to help to stem the tide of food costs, because I'm very particular about food inflation. That agency was mired in a lot of controversies to the point where the MD was eventually removed after a lot of scandalous publication exposing the criminality that was going on there. But guess what happened? The man is still working free. EFCC refused to investigate and check what happened. And today, we are having serious food inflation. I am talking about an agency called NARSA that was developed and was put there to help to stem the tide of food inflation. So you see, it doesn't matter how much we do or we try to remove cost of governance, as long as we are not dealing with corruption, we will have challenge. Now, to answer your second question, you asked me if this current government have the political will to do that. I can assure you they do. And why did I say that? The first thing this president did was what many presidents had been planning or hoping, but were not able to do. The first pronouncement was to remove subsidy. A beautiful thing, because from understanding what we are spending on subsidy triples or is even more than whatever we have been spending on public service. You can see, from example, what has happened in the past 1 week. Fuel prices have gone up in the entire West African coast, which means we have been carrying unnecessary burden because we were busy subsidizing what we should not subsidize. So I believe this government has the will. And also, you remember, the other challenge we've been grappling with has been the dichotomy in the FX regime. And this president had promised that he's going to unify it. So I can tell you, this government has the will to handle it. All we need is to give them the time to sit down, settle down, and be able to cut down the cost of governance, especially when you look at duplicity in agencies and some ministries and departments and agencies. So I believe the Asiwaju-led government is well prepared and well primed to help to reduce that. And also, we also must talk about revenue. Our challenge, we can use all the example that, we have this, but revenue mobilization has been one huge challenge that we've had. And this is something that we know without equivocation that the present president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has done very well in, especially when he was governor of Lagos, when they had revenue challenge, when the former president Obasanjo decided to hold to Lagos revenue despite Supreme Court saying otherwise. So I think we are well primed. All we need is just give them some time, let them settle down, have all the components in places, and I believe we are going to have a better cost of governance being manageable beyond what we've had in the past, and also ability to generate more revenue so that we can meet not just our need, but also I know we've been having this story about almost 90% of our revenue is going to paying debt, and I know they have also talked about cutting down debt. So I think we should not sit down and watch and see how well they do in that regard. But I think I should give them some time. We will see them doing what they promised to do, hopefully, based on the antecedent of the president.
All right, and that is true. In the first couple of weeks or first 100 days of this current administration, we've seen them tackle issues that have been kicked down the road that are quite thorny, especially this fuel subsidy. So on that, knowing that corruption is the nucleus of all of these situations, how do you think this will be tackled by this current government?
Well, I cannot tell you how it will be tackled because I am not in government and I do not know.
Okay, let me correct that. However, can it be tackled?
Okay, beautiful. How you can tackle it is simple. The president also, I will use his word because he made this statement. Firstly, he talked about creating a situation where you have a credit facility. And he said, and let me try and paraphrase, not exactly quote him, that if a man is working in government and he wants to buy a property, maybe a house, one of the things that has built corruption is the fact that he has to pay overnight. Now, he's talking about having to work with the private sector to ensure that you have credit system in place. That one, consumer credit, if you want to buy a car, you don't have to stomp out 5 million to go and buy a Tokumbo car. You can pay a certain percentage of that amount of the car. Then over time, it is paid. So you can deal with corruption, although you cannot deal with human greed. Human greed will have to be dealt with by law and order. And I gave an example of Nassal earlier on, that the MD was removed after a lot of allegations. I mean, something was published in a newspaper, I don't want to mention the name now, and then he was removed. Unfortunately, he has not been prosecuted, and I don't know if the investigation is still going on. Maybe that's why they have not prosecuted him. But these are the areas. So you can deal with corruption, you can deal with so many things, but you can't deal with human greed. So human greed will have to be dealt with by the force of the law. Let them meet the law completely on whoever is found wanting. Because if, for instance, he talked about credit, like I said earlier on, and if he's true to his word and he's doing that, I also remember that I think on Friday or so, he talked about reviewing salaries. So those are areas where you can curb corruption. He talked about reviewing salaries. So if you review upward the salary of civil servant, you ensure that they are well paid to match the current challenges of our time, then you have done your best in terms of curbing corruption. The remaining, like I said, is now left to deal with human greed, because some people are so greedy. I have had stories of people arrested who have 20 properties, 50 houses, 100 cars, and then you ask yourself, what does a human being need with all these things? So those are the areas that will have to be dealt with the force of the law. But in terms of doing what the government should do, I think some of the plans that he has enumerated completely deals with corruption if they are well implemented as planned.
Well, thank you very much for that. And talking about the issue of minimum wage, yes, we've heard reports that minimum wage will be reviewed, but I think that will probably only benefit, those in paid employment, especially in the civil service. So what about artisans, who make a daily living? What can be done to support them, so that they can also deal with current realities, especially the removal of, fuel subsidy?
Yeah, we'll have to look at it in different ways. Before I go to the artisans, I will talk about private sector. You can give tax breaks. You can give some other incentives to employers. You remember during the COVID, the President Muhammadu Buhari-led government helped in paying salaries of private schools and some other places like that. So you can do things like that. You can give incentives, you can give tax break, you can give tax payback, and so many other things, incentives that can be given to private sector. And as for artisans, well, you have to develop a model because there are several models you can use. You can give cash rebate. You can do what we did in terms of the SIPs that was done in the past. So there are a lot of models that will be looked at. I don't think for the government yet, at least. So I cannot say this is what will be done. But I am sure that the government will have a think tank to ensure that every Nigerian are touched. And if let me delve to a subnational. Lagos State government has already started looking forward, even before the subsidy was taken off, buying solar buses that will be able to compete. So we have to also develop our public transport system so that it is efficient and people don't have to drive their cars. And then lastly, we have to look at power. If power is constant and people can get public power, there will be less reliance on generator. And if there is less reliance on generator, means artisans would naturally depend on power to do their businesses. Let's say a barber, what do women call this? A salon people and all those people can, a welder and all such kind of businesses can easily, they will remove costs. The cost that is normally associated with using generator and some other extra power system that we use because the public utilities are not reliable. So there are a lot of models that can be looked at in terms of touching everybody. But I can assure you it's a huge opportunity to touch the lives of Nigerians. And I believe that Asiwaju must have thought about this before he removed subsidy, because I remember I was interviewed on that day and I said something very key, and I will repeat that. This is the most prepared president we've had in the last, how many years we've had the democracy back since 1999. He wants to be president. He didn't get in there by accident. So I believe there is another plan to ensure that other facet of Nigerian life is touched by whatever palliatives will be rolled out in the coming days and weeks and months.
All right, and these models that you discussed, they all sound very implementable and very necessary. But one might wonder, in fact, many might wonder why some of them, if not all of them, were implemented before the removal of subsidy. It's one thing to think about it and discuss it, but the implementation it would have been key. Your opinion on that?
Okay, my opinion, this is personal, and I'll say this. This is why I talked about you can deal with corruption, you can deal with problems, but you cannot deal with human greed. I can assure you that the outgone government made subsidy available till end of June. But the moment President Tinubu said subsidy will leave, everybody stopped selling, created artificial scarcity, then increased their pump prices. Till June 30th, we should have been buying petrol for the old amount. So for that, I cannot blame the government. I blame our human greed. And I will give you another example.
Can I just quickly interrupt you? You know, for instance, when the NNPC raised the price, couldn't there have been a directive, from the federal government telling them to revert back to the old price?
No, don't forget that the NNPC... Till the end of June. No. The NNPC is also a private entity. Now, we need to understand that too. It's also a private concern. But before you interrupted me, I will still go back to that, but I was saying something about our penchant for greed and deliberate wickedness towards ourselves. During COVID, this at the height of that pandemic, this face mask that used to cost 15 naira per piece, people went as far as selling for 1,000 naira per piece. That is who we are. We are a wicked bunch of people who like to thrive on the pains of ourselves, and then we blame other people. Because most of them are selling old stock that they bought at a rate that was subsidized. Yet, they have decided to go up and they were selling at, they are still selling at the high price. So I don't know what we can do about that, because NNPC itself is a private entity. It's no longer a government company. So you need to understand that aspect. We used to have a DPR, or I don't know, this organization that used to set prices. I don't know what they are doing. Maybe they are not doing their job. I don't know whether this is what should be done. But I thought there was enough provision for subsidy till end of June. And for that, I blame our greed and our penchant for taking advantage of ourselves and of situation the moment it calls for it.
Are you saying?
However,
okay.
I believe in the coming days. However, I believe in the coming days, the leadership of Nigeria will be able to roll out plans and actions to cushion the effect of this subsidy on the lives of our vulnerable Nigerians, especially the poorest of the poor amongst us.
Well, it seems that you're saying the element of surprise might be the only successful tactic in order to premeditate these acts of wickedness on the part of human beings, in saying that if individuals were aware of what was going to happen beforehand, situations might not play out the way that they were supposed to. But let me just move on.
Exactly.
All right. Let me move on to my other question. This one is a little bit thorny. It's been discussed quite a bit over the past couple of years. The number of individuals in our National Assembly and state houses of assembly. Obviously, we cannot reduce them, but there is a worry that they pull in large salaries, something that could be reduced to the favor of all. What is, first of all, the likelihood of that even happening in this administration? And what is your opinion on whether or not to reduce some of those salaries?
Okay, let me be very frank and honest with you. If I want to do populism, I will come here and say, yes, let's reduce their salary. In fact, let's cancel one arm of government in the federal. But those are just populism. Their last budget was 150 billion or thereabout. If you look at that in the real scheme of our issue, it's a drop in the ocean. Honestly, the National Assembly and the state assemblies are not our problem. They are too infinitesimal when you look at the general real problem that we have. So I don't think they are the challenge. I don't think they are a problem at all. In fact, I dare say that whatever we think they are taking, yes, maybe they should be a bit more open with their real salaries, because there have been a lot of conjecture. And if you go to the National Assembly, from what I understand, that 150 billion budget is not just for the lawmaker. There are staff, there are workers, there are institutes and stuff. So it's easy to sit down and say, oh, they are the problem. But 150 billion naira in a problem of an economy that is 10, 12 trillion, I don't really think it is a major problem. What we need to do is to harmonize our agencies and departments. We have too many of them that are duplicating the same thing. And then what they now end up doing is to create unnecessary red tape, unnecessary cumbersome nature of working. Those are the areas we should be looking at. National Assembly is not a problem. Like I said, 150 billion is not a problem when you look at our major problem, which is in trillions. So even if you take that 150 billion and dump it, it still has not answered any question. in the grand scheme of our problem. So I refuse to join that bandwagon of pushing National Assembly as a problem. I used to be there, but as you learn more, as you understand more, as you have more information, you realize that some of the things we fight are not really our fight. Our major fight is corruption, like I said earlier on, and secondly, we have to grow our revenue base, which has been too narrow over the years. When we grow our revenue base, we realize that we're able to meet some of our bigger challenges that we are facing in Nigeria as a country.
Well, I'm sure a lot of Nigerians would disagree with you on that, but anyway, you are entitled to your opinion.
Well, they have a right to disagree. Everybody can have opinion.
Definitely.
They have a right.
Now, in his inaugural speech,
right.
President Bola Tinubu promised that his government will review all complaints about multiple taxation for foreign businesses. But is this actually enough, to boost foreign direct investment inflows? What else can be done, to stimulate FDI so that it can help Nigeria's industrial growth?
Well, I like this, your question. God bless you. Actually, you have to start somewhere. From what the president said on his inaugural speech in terms of multiple taxation, that is the first step. But beyond that, if you also follow his plan, he also talked about incentives. You see, most of the time we normally focus just on FDIs. But most of us don't know that FDIs is always neither here or there. The biggest FDIs we should be looking at now is the plan that he has in stock for us in terms of industrialization. If we're able to industrialize, we will do less of importation. If we do less of importation, we'll be able to produce most of our goods here. He has promised he was going to give, he is going to, because he just became the president a week ago. So he promised he's going to give a lot of incentives to companies. Rather than import their goods to Nigeria, they will come to Nigeria, produce this good. Now, what this will do is that we'll be able to, one, reduce whatever wastage we've been incurring in terms of forex. Secondly, we'll be able to create more jobs. Thirdly, that FDI that used to run and come back and go back and come back will now be more stable because it will be invested in projects that you can see, not this portfolio FDIs that has been running and coming back and running and coming back. So I think he has a broader plan than just portfolio FDIs. You are looking at a bigger way of attracting foreign investment in terms of industrialization and being able to produce most of what you consume. And also, many people are not looking at it also. If we get this right like a plan, then what will happen is that we will not just bring in FDIs, we will now become a net exporter of some of these things. Let me give you an example. For instance, the moment this petrol subsidy was removed, it affected the entire West African coast. Now, what is going to happen now is this. If you create an avenue and you incentivize these companies to develop their businesses in Nigeria rather than import finished goods to Nigeria, you will now become what you call the hub in maybe West Africa or the entire sub-Saharan Africa. And then you can now begin to sell these things, export them to those places. So you not only earn forex, you also get good deals in terms of taxation, in terms of creating jobs for our young people, and so many areas that I think he has planned to. Because I followed his plan to the letter, and I know those are the plans he has in stock. And in my estimation, well implemented, then Nigeria stands on the cusp of greatness. Well,
Ayobami Oyalowo, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for this discussion. We really appreciate it.